A very good morning to all my dear students. Let me ask you something. How many of you have listened to the music in nature? Now you must be thinking, what music? I haven't listened to any music in nature. Yes, there is a music in nature. It is hidden and faint. You need to listen truly, and then adding to your imagination, you can really listen to the wonderful music of nature. It is there in the sea, it is there in the wind, it is everywhere, even in the flowing water.
I'm sure that all of you will be waiting for an activity. Am I right? Shall we move on to the activity? You'll really enjoy it. You'll be listening to three natural sounds which are very familiar to you. Let me see how many of you really listen to the nature. Here's the first sound. You'll try to identify the sound. How many of you were able to identify it? Let's check if you were right. It's the sound of rain. Shall we move on to the second sound? Try to guess the sound now. Were you able to guess it right? Let's see. It is the bubbling sound of a stream. Now we have the third sound, and I'm sure that each of you will definitely love to be in this place. Let's try the next sound. I know all of you would have guessed it right, isn't it? It's the sound of waves.
We move on to the chapter Wind Song by Anne Carroll Moore. Let's know more about the writer. She was an American writer, an educator, and advocate for children's libraries. She was awarded the Regina Medal for her pioneering work in children's library services. And who's a pioneer? A person who was among the first to explore, that is, related to the work of children's libraries. She was the first one in this area. Before moving on to the lesson, let me ask you, how many of you have pets at home? It can be birds or animals. Do they behave the same at all times? No, it differs, isn't it? They behave differently in different situations. Now we'll see some of the birds and how they behave in different situations, or what are the peculiar characteristics of this kind of birds. You can now see the picture of a bird here. It's a very small bird. Can you identify which bird it is? It is a hummingbird. We'll move on to a video where you can know more about a hummingbird. Hummingbirds are marvelous. They're the smallest migrating bird. They're the only birds that can fly backward. They hover in midair at rapid wing flapping rates which vary around from 12 beats per second in the largest species to in excess of 80 times in some of the smallest. They have good color vision, and some birds like ruby-throated hummingbirds prefer orange or red flowers. They have no sense of smell. You have another bird here. Have you seen this bird before? Look carefully. Is it a crow? No, similar to a crow. Unlike its smaller cousin the crow, not a lot has been written about this remarkable bird. It is a raven. Ravens are one of the smartest birds. When it comes to intelligence, these birds rate up with chimpanzees and dolphins. Ravens can imitate human speech. In captivity, ravens can talk better than parrots. Now, we'll watch a video where you can see how a raven imitates human speech.
So ravens are excellent at mimicking sounds they hear. Mischief, can you say hello?
Hello.
Good bird. He does all sorts of voices. Can you say hi?
Hi.
Good job. And sometimes he hears people who have a cold. Good job, Mischief.
Hope you all have enjoyed the raven's talk and the hummingbird's flight. Now, do you all know, how many of you know that the animals and birds have the ability to understand the changes that happen in the weather condition? We understand this based on the movement of these animals. If it rains, if an earthquake occurs, if there is a tornado. Earlier, ancestors relied on this animals and birds, the change in behavior of this birds and animals, to understand the changes in the weather. And again, you also know that the particular chapter that we are going to deal with is that of wind song. And now you will come to see some of the animals and birds and how they understand the change in the weather. You can see 4 pictures here. Here you can see the puppies, isn't it? So normally if any changes in the weather happens, you can see that these animals behave in a different way. So if it is a dog, you can see that it whimper and run around looking for a place for them to hide during this thunderstorms. If it is an elephant, you can see that they trumpet loudly and they just start running to the higher plains. If it is bees and butterflies, they disappear before rain. If it is a shark, they move to deeper waters. So they understand the changes in the weather, and you can see that change in the behavior of these animals during those times. Now we'll watch a small video on the chapter Wind Song. You'll get a better idea of this chapter.
On Saturday, Rachel went to the nearest town with her parents, her brother and her sister. They stopped at the general store where her father needed to do business with the grocer. While her brother and sister explored the store and her parents spoke with the grocer, Rachel spotted a bright yellow bird in a cage near the doorway. It hopped from perch to perch, rarely standing still. There was another man looking at the bird, standing right beside her. He smiled at Rachel and said, "It listens to the wind," before mysteriously walking away. Rachel's parents came to get her. Right then, the little bird lifted its head, swelled its chest, and sang out a joyous trill. Rachel saw her mother's face light up with delight. Seeing the joy on her mother's face made Rachel happy. She traded a beautiful quilt that she had embroidered the other day for the bird and took it home. Back home, the little canary entertained them endlessly. They called him Sir Gallant because he battled with the wind. The louder the wind, the more loudly he sang. Rachel often wondered what the man had said to her in the store. What was there in the wind to listen for? Rachel listened closely and started to hum. There it was, a faint melody in the winds. One day, Sir Gallant fell silent. Neither did he sing, nor did he hop. Only Rachel found this unusual, because even when he did not sing, Sir Gallant would always hop in delight. Rachel knew he was not sick, like everyone thought. Quietly, she went outside and saw dark thunderclouds in the sky. There was no wind that day. No birds chirped. No prairie dogs barked. The air felt heavy. Rachel also heard the faint rumbling of thunder. Suddenly, she remembered the man in the store and his words. "It listens to the wind." She knew immediately that they were in danger.
Mother, Mother, it's a tornado. Get into the cellar, quick!
Rachel called out to her family. She went to the fields to warn her father. She convinced him not to wait outside, for it was already raining heavily. As they were quickly making their way to the cellar, thunderous rains pounded the air. The tornado lasted only minutes, though it felt like hours. When the family finally emerged from their shelter, they were relieved to find their cabin intact. The animals had escaped the tornado, but their fields were destroyed. The loss of crops would make things more difficult, but they felt happy to be alive. They were safe because of a little yellow bird.
Page number 45. It was a hot and dry day. The wind howled in the plains. Rachel sat on the bed, hand stitching a quilt. She had just finished when the door swung open and her father came in. "Hot day out there," he said, wiping his forehead. Rachel ran to him and proudly showed him her masterpiece. It was a cheerful quilt with neat stitches outlining the colorful squares. It was the worst kind of day. The weather was not good. The family rarely had fun or relaxation. The wind howled, a large crying sound made by the wind. The family were living in the plains. Plains are large area of flat land with few trees. Many people live on plains because it is easy to travel and to farm on flat lands. Rachel was stitching a quilt. It was a hand-stitched quilt. It is at the same time that she had completed the stitching of the quilt that the door swung open. It was opened all of a sudden and her father came inside. Father said, "It's very hot outside. He must be a farmer." And you can also see that he is wiping his forehead because it's very hot outside. He came inside. Rachel was very happy. She was very proud of herself. She wanted to show her masterpiece to her father. What do you mean by a masterpiece? A work of great skill. She was very proud with a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction in her own achievement of having done the quilt. She showed it to her father. It was a pleasant or cheerful quilt. It had neat stitches outlining the colorful squares. It was very beautiful. It was such a beautiful quilt that she had made. So she was very happy. She was very proud. "That's a mighty fine piece of work," he nodded. "Let us go into town this Saturday. You can show off your quilt. I've got a sack of onions ready to take to the market." On Saturday, the family excitedly drove to the nearest town, 20 miles away, and stopped at the general store. While a brother and sister explored the store and a parent spoke to the grocer, Rachel wandered to the doorway to look at a bright yellow bird in a cage. It hopped from perch to perch, rarely standing still. A man who had stopped by was also watching the bird intently. "It listens to the wind," he told Rachel before walking away. The father was very happy to see the beautiful work of Rachel. It was a very beautiful quilt. He promised her that they'll go to the market that Saturday. She can show her quilt at the market. He also had some onions to be taken to the market. It was not every week that they used to go to the market. So the family was very excited. They were very happy to go to the market, which was 20 miles away. When they reached the general store, The younger brother and sister, they were searching or they were inspecting the grocery shop. The parents were talking to the grocer. Who's a grocer? A person who sells foodstuff and small household goods. Rachel just wandered. She just walked or moved leisurely in an aimless way. It is at this time that she came across a bird in a cage. It was a beautiful bright yellow colored bird. It looked just like the sun itself with its bright yellow color. It attracted everybody with its beautiful chirrups. And she could see that the bird was just moving from one perch to the other. It was not standing still. What do you mean by a perch? It is an object on which the bird alights or sits. It can be a branch or a horizontal bar. As it is seated in a cage, you can see that it must be a bar, a pole, or a road. And why do you think that the bird was just moving from one perch to the other? It was not standing still. You can see that it was moving continuously, maybe to quieten its thoughts in order to pay attention to things outside. It is at the same time you can see that there was another man who was passing by. He was also just watching the bird. He was also attracted. He was watching the bird intently. The man, before moving away, said to Rachel, "It listens to the wind." Here, the man meant that the bird listened to the wind. What do you mean by that? The man meant that the bird could listen to and understand the changes in the wind, thus predicting weather changes like storm or tornado or things like that. But Rachel didn't understand that. But she just listened to the words of the man, saying, "It listens to the wind." Did you all enjoy the video of the little canary? I hope you all have enjoyed it. A canary is an undemanding little charmer that's a beginner's first bird. It's a pleasant companion bird with a cheerful disposition. They are inexpensive birds that you can get at just about any pet store. Now you can look into your books. Her parents appeared a moment later. At the same time, the little bird lifted its head, swelled its chest, and sang out a joyous trill. Rachel saw her mother's face light up with delight. Quietly, Rachel traded her beautiful quill for the bird. Back home, the little canary entertained them endlessly. They called him Sir Gallant because he battled with the wind. The louder the wind, the more loudly he sang. The competition was so fierce that sometimes everyone burst out laughing. Sir Gallant lifted their spirits, turning dusty days into sunshine days. The parents were visible now. They came near Rachel. It is at the same time that the bird raised its head. It expanded its chest and gave out a beautiful musical note. Rachel now noticed how happy her mother was. So silently, she traded her beautiful quill for the little canary. Back home, the little canary entertained the whole family. It provided enjoyment. It diverted the dry days of the family to days of happiness. They have named it as Sir Gallant. And what's the meaning of gallant? A reference to the bravery of knights in the olden days. Why did they name Sir Gallant? Because the little canary always fought with the wind. There was a fierce competition, a tough competition was there between the wind and the canary. The louder the wind, the more louder the little canary sang. Sometimes it was so fierce, it was so tough that the whole family burst out laughing. The little canary lifted their spirits. It just made them happy, turning the dusty days, dry days into days of happiness, into sunshine days. Here you can see that Rachel had exchanged a quilt for the canary. This tells how caring she was, how selfless she was by giving the beautiful quilt for the sake of a mother's happiness. As an activity, you can draw or stick a picture of Rachel and a canary and you can file it. Thank you.